Everyone follows the rules. No one really controls the game. Louis Morel, a cybersecurity analyst, opens an old McAfee report. 3 words stop him cold. Night Dragon Campaign. He looks up. The oil giants have never really regained control. Louis, a consultant for an energy group, has to prepare an educational memo for the executive committee. On paper, Night Dragon is just an old textbook case, an handled incident. But the more he lays out the attack diagrams, the more one detail bothers him. The attackers didn't try to break anything. They did much worse. They learned to think like the oil bosses. He goes back to the report, dated February 10th, 2011. McAfee speaks of a coordinated, systematic, targeted campaign. Intrusions spanning at least since November 2009, with technical traces that seem to go back to 2007. Louis highlights the same phrases over and over. No ransom, no claim sabotage, nothing spectacular. Just files, patiently siphoned off. Geological studies, acquisition offers, negotiation scenarios, exchanges between executives. Another detail stops him. The tools used are ordinary, almost off the shelf for a hacker. Yet the attackers choose with surgical precision what they steal. This imbalance preys on his mind. It looks like an intelligence operation, carried out with amateur tools. Louis is alone in a small, glass-walled meeting room on the top floor. The air conditioning is blowing too hard. The blinds are half lowered. In front of him, an open laptop. A second screen saturated with anonymized logs. On the table, a paper folder marked Awareness XCOM, Draft. On the wall, a screen displays a silent map dotted with red dots. United States, Kazakhstan, Greece, a few scattered spots elsewhere. Traces of victims. No names, just silent impact zones. Louis starts with the acceptable version. He knows it by heart. It reassures the executives. Night Dragon would be the work of a small group of opportunistic hackers based somewhere in China, exploiting basic vulnerabilities. Poorly patched web servers, weak passwords, a bit of spear-phishing, standard tools like rats already seen elsewhere. They target oil because information is profitable on the resale market. They aggregate data, resell it to intermediaries, perhaps to unscrupulous competitors. No need to imagine a global plan. Just persistent, intelligent hackers who manage to connect a few dots and exploit the digital naivety of a lagging sector. In this story, the oil giants were victims of a particularly well-organized digital burglary. Nothing more. This hypothesis blows up in a second when Louis realizes that the thieves never tried to publicly monetize a single one of the stolen datasets. He then moves on to a more sophisticated version. He assembles the clues like a puzzle. The command and control servers are mainly in China. The domain names are registered with Chinese registrars. The activity hours match Beijing office hours. The targets are oil, gas, and petrochemical companies in the midst of an economic war for access to deposits. Night Dragon becomes, in this scenario, a structured economic espionage operation, carried out or at least tolerated by a state apparatus. The exfiltrated data would be used to steer calls for tenders, guide investments, calibrate negotiations. In Louis's mind, everything lines up. Earlier campaigns, Titan Rain, Aurora, draw a continuity. Then he comes across a dry sentence in the report. No official link, no public proof of a state sponsor. The scenery flips. In this reversal, what he thought was solid becomes suspect. What if the obvious were a mental trap? A third idea imposes itself, almost reluctantly. What if Night Dragon were neither an overt state operation nor pure banditry, but a gray zone deliberately maintained? An interweaving of private actors, subcontractors, intermediaries who all profit from the ambiguity, while states are content to look the other way as long as the results suit them. In this picture, China is no longer necessarily the brains. It becomes the ideal backdrop. Louis raises his eyes to the map of red dots. He feels like it's blurring. He realizes that he is in the process of writing a reassuring narrative for executives who mostly want to believe in a world where each attack has a clear culprit, a clear origin, an identified remedy. But Night Dragon doesn't look like that. What disturbs him most is not the identity of the attackers. It's the precision of what they chose to take. It was not refinery schematics or pipeline diagrams that they tore out first. It was the bidding strategies, the valuation assumptions for the deposits, the wiggle room in tenders, the bargaining margins. In other words, the financial and political brain of the sector, not the machine, the will. He bends over the reconstructed logs, a series of nighttime accesses to VPN accounts of high-level executives, compressed, password-protected archives, exfiltrated in small packets mixed into legitimate traffic. Nothing spectacular, just a slow, meticulous extraction. He writes in his memo, long-running intrusion campaign aimed at economic espionage, relying on classic techniques but a selection of human targets with very high strategic value. And he crosses it out. The word that bothers him is not intrusion, it's long-running. For Louis, the wall is neither in the lines of code nor in the Chinese infrastructures. It lies in that duration. Traces going back several years, companies that said nothing, data taken out without a sound, a campaign that no one really interrupts. He imagines the scene on the victim's side. A large oil company discovers abnormal outbound traffic to an unknown IP. The internal teams dig, identify a rat, clean up some servers, call in a player like McAfee. They isolate, reinstall, apply some patches, harden the VPNs a bit. They produce a confidential report for management. And then everyday life resumes. Projects, investments, meetings with producing states, negotiations with majors and national companies. What blocks things is not the technical inability to defend oneself. It is the strategic interest in not looking too closely. Louis thinks back to a sentence a CISO whispered to him, off the record, during an audit in another energy company. If we really dig all the way, we discover things we can't afford to admit to the board of directors. He hadn't taken him seriously. With Night Dragon, that sentence comes back with force. Because fully acknowledging this campaign is not just admitting that they were hacked. It is admitting that, for months or years, unknown actors read the negotiation scenarios even before they reached the tables of ministers, CEOs, sovereign funds. That they saw acceptable bottom prices, red lines, possible concessions. That they could anticipate which blocks would be abandoned, which projects would be delayed, which acquisitions would be deemed too risky. Louis scrolls through the types of documents mentioned by McAfee: field studies, financial models, PowerPoint presentations on acquisition strategies, very high-level email exchanges. He pauses on a technical detail: the use of native Windows tools, batch scripts, RAR, nothing exotic, which means the adversary was able to move through these networks like just another remote employee, invisible because ordinary. In his draft presentation to the executive committee, he tries to explain this without causing panic. He writes a sentence about exploiting the dependence on subcontractors and consultants with extensive access rights. He remembers the dozens of generic accounts he sees at every audit, shared among service providers. There too, the wall appears. To really fix this type of vulnerability, the very structure of the relationships between the company and its galaxy of partners would have to be overhauled. Rethink contracts, add constraints, audits, delays. In other words, slow down, lose deals, annoy partner states. The wall is not technical. It is political and economic. In a sector where every delay can cost billions and leave a deposit to a competitor, no one has any interest in admitting that their corporate network has become a potential extension of the information system of an invisible adversary. Louis rubs his eyes. They burn. The air in the room is too dry. His neck is stiff. On the table, a coffee has long gone cold. His body registers the tension that the official narrative forces him to smooth over. He has been asked for an operational memo with pragmatic recommendations. He has not been asked to raise the question that keeps turning in his head. What if, despite our patches, the rules of the game were already rigged? He leans over the part of the McAfee report that deals with the timeline. Activities detected starting in the late 2000s, but technical indicators pointing to domain names registered several years earlier, to infrastructures patiently prepared. He imagines an actor who knows he will never be officially named. He knows that even if his infrastructure is detected, it will be enough to move a few servers, reconfigure a few domains, rename a campaign. Night Dragon is just a label, stuck on afterward by a cybersecurity company to tell a story people can understand. That's the wall. The illusion that an operation name contains the problem. People talk about a finished campaign. It's taught as a case from the past. For executives, it's reassuring. There was a before and after, lessons learned. Louis knows that's not how it works. The tools used in Night Dragon are still out there, in other campaigns. The same reflexes of network engineers, the same compromises with service providers, the same trade-offs between security and speed of execution. Behind him, he feels the weight of all that is left unsaid.
How many contracts were negotiated with one party already knowing the other's hand? How many producing states adjusted their demands based on information obtained through channels no press release will ever mention? He types a new sentence. Night Dragon reveals a lasting asymmetry. Attackers can make do with simple tools and a time horizon of several years. Victims think in terms of annual budgets and project cycles. He reads it. He nods. And he knows that sentence will never make it in that form to the executive committee. When Louis reviews the analyses from other security companies, he finds a quiet consensus. Night Dragon is categorized as a successful economic espionage campaign. Technically unsophisticated, but remarkably effective. In the details, however, the narratives diverge. Some stress the looming shadow of a state behind the Chinese infrastructures, while others point out that everything in these attacks could just as well be the work of a disciplined private group playing on appearances. What unites them is less what they state than what they skirt around. None of them wants to put in black and white the idea that years of energy policies and major industrial trade-offs may have played out with an invisible hand resting on the shoulders of those who decided. On the eve of his presentation, Louis prints a final version of his memo, 8 pages, soberly titled, Lessons from the so-called Night Dragon Campaign for Our Group. He scans through it, pen in hand. At the start of the document, he has kept the usual framework. Coordinated intrusion campaign, oil and gas sector targeted, combined use of application vulnerabilities, and weak passwords. The central part lays out the attack vectors, the rats, the command servers in China, the RAR archives, the booby-trapped emails. Then come the recommendations. Hardening remote access, reviewing service providers, strengthening detection of outbound traffic anomalies, training executives. All of that is true. But as he reads himself again, he understands what no longer is, for him. When he first discovered Night Dragon, he told himself that the story would boil down to an awakening. Hackers can already reach the giants of energy. That sentence struck him as a strong warning. It gave him the feeling he was contributing to something crucial, putting his skills at the service of a clean, almost heroic battle between identifiable attackers and organized defenders. Digging deeper, that illusion unravels. What he thought was true was that companies had, over the long term, the ability to regain control. That a named, dissected, published incident could be filed away as past, serving as a marker to never go through that again. Dates, timelines, reports, all that vocabulary creates the impression of a closed story. Yet what Night Dragon reveals to him now is darker and narrower. The attackers didn't need to break anything. They simply slipped their eyes into the gaps of a system that was pursuing above all speed, volume, immediate profitability. They didn't force a reinforced door. They took advantage of service entrances left open for subcontractors, remote portals never truly monitored, shared accounts everyone uses because otherwise we don't get anything done. The oil giants did not lose control of their critical infrastructures in the sense in which it's understood in official speeches. They lost something more intangible and more essential, the monopoly on the vision of their own future. For years, while they were negotiating with states, arbitrating billions in investments, fine-tuning their geopolitical bets, someone, somewhere, had a copy of their internal scenarios. Louis understands that what he is discovering in place of his initial narrative is the real limit of his profession. It can recommend, correct, harden. It can help reduce the attack surface, raise the cost of entry for intruders, but it cannot turn back time. It cannot erase decisions that have already been made based on information that was no longer truly exclusive. Nor can it force those who sign contracts to accept that, in this game, absolute secrecy no longer exists. In front of him, the laptop remains open on the map of red dots. The United States, Kazakhstan, Greece, other anonymous areas. Nothing indicates precisely what was lost, or how these losses translated into fields not obtained, concessions wrested, clauses toughened at the last minute by a very well-informed counterparty. He adds one last sentence to his memo, almost at the bottom of the last page. The lessons of Night Dragon are not only about attack techniques, but about the implicit assumption, still very widespread, that our strategic information is, by default, unknown to our counterparties. He hesitates, rereads it, leaves it. The next day, in front of the executive committee, he will calmly go through the slides. The executives will ask questions about budgets, priorities, regulatory compliance.
There will be talk of new detection solutions, of clauses to be added to service providers' contracts, of awareness programs for the teams. No one will ask him whether, in his opinion, some past deals would have turned out differently without Night Dragon. As he puts his computer away after the meeting, a thought hits him with painful clarity. Everything he has presented aims to limit future damage, not to close the breach that has already altered the trajectory of his sector. In a hallway, waiting for the elevator, he catches himself murmuring under his breath. And now, what are we still negotiating as if no one were watching us? The room is empty. On the table, a pen lies across the Executive Committee Awareness Final Version file, slightly askew, as if abandoned in mid-gesture. The screen on the wall still shows, in standby mode, the map of red dots, but the outlines of the continents have faded, drowned in a uniform gray. One can hear, very faintly, the continuous hum of the air conditioning, almost covering the discrete buzzing of the projector left on. In the window, the reflection of the map is superimposed on the city lights and the orange flames of a refinery flare in the distance, tiny, flickering.